Hello friends, it's Jenna, here to report in on NaNoWriMo week 2. I thought this month was going to be pretty ordinary for me, pretty quiet. It hasn't been. Well, the first thing that happened was I ran out of one of my anxiety medications, which is what helps me sleep. So I went through a few days of complete sleep deprivation. And then I bought some melatonin while I waited for an appointment with my doctor to renew my anxiety medication. They're not kidding about the melatonin headache. Oh my gosh, I've had migraines that hurt as much. So last week was pretty much a complete wash as far as anything, not just creative, but as far as the studying for my upcoming exam for my new job goes as well. So that was fun. But I did get the prescription refilled, and so I have the medication and I'm sleeping okay. But that means that I need to catch up on the studying. So I've been doing that pretty much all the time when I'm not sleeping. For the last few days. The test itself is on Tuesday. Hopefully I'll be ready. And is also going to involve an hour drive to the testing center because the local one only offers this particular test once a month, and I didn't want to wait all the way until August. Because I need to get started, man. I need to be earning that money. Shakespeare got to get paid, yo. That's terrible. So, yeah, as far as writing goes, not a whole lot has happened. I did a little bit of editing on a fanfic because I've kind of been thinking about, well, now that I'm not feeling the pressing need to get anything published right away, so, to Shakespeare got to get paid. I'm kind of thinking, well, I've got these fanfics that have been sitting unfinished for the longest time. I could work on those and have a little fun. So I've kind of done that a little bit with one Sherlock AU kind of thing that initially started for the Unconventional Romance Challenge, where you take the summary of an old Harlequin romance or Mills and Boon romance and rework it to fit within your fandom. So one of the examples they give is that you can take Spock and Kirk of classic Star Trek and have them have a secret baby or something like that. Category romances. They're fun. But yeah, I started one 2 or 3 years ago. Did the 1,000-word minimum for the challenge, but I have been wanting to finish it and adding a few hundred words here and there between other stuff. So I've been kind of poking at that a little bit. It's actually been a little daunting because it's going to require some writing that's out of my wheelhouse, the kind of stuff that I don't really know a whole lot about and not sure how to research. And then it's also going to take a lot of research. But I think the plot's really good. It's a Sherlock gem for reasons. Largely having to do with how cute Andrew Scott is. And yeah, so that's one of the things that I've been kind of thinking, it would be fun to finish that this year. And then still working on Continuo. And the thing that's been a little frustrating with that, now you see why I'm doing insurance instead of voiceover work now, don't you? The thing that's been frustrating with Continuo is that I have had trouble figuring out the love interest's name. The hero, the main character, has been William since day one. That's his name, that's always been his name, that will always be his name. But I haven't known what to call the love interest. And again, for reasons, I want him to be Irish. His father is a punk musician from Dublin, and the band is kind of loosely based on the Clash, so they have a lot in common with the Clash's history and stuff. 1 second. I also have Cookie Clicker open. Hey. Anyway, so what I've been trying to think of was, okay, what would a punk musician and his wife, girlfriend, I haven't actually decided if they're married or not. They were married or not. What two punk musicians basically would name their child in the early 80s. And so my first thought was, well, something traditionally Irish, because at that time, that was kind of when reclaiming Irish heritage was starting to become a thing. At least as far as I understand it. I could be wrong. My history of modern Ireland is nothing like my knowledge of history of ancient Ireland. That's the drawback of being obsessed with mythology. So my first choice was Oisin, which of course is from the Oceanic poems and part of the Finn McCool mythos, and part of that whole story with James McPherson and his hoax with the Oceanic poems. And a musician acquaintance of mine, his youngest name is Oisin, and I just, ever since I heard it, I just thought it was the cutest. But no one knows how to pronounce it in America. It's one of those Irish names where it looks like it was, created by two different committees, one for pronunciation, one for spelling. A lot of Irish names are like that. So I had it Oisin for a while and then decided, maybe not. So then I thought Seamus, which is, also a kind of a traditional sort of name, but reclaims the Irish heritage with the nickname of Shay, which is really cute. I had a friend in college named Shay, who was a woman. So there was always that little bit of dissonance, like, well, the only person I've known with this is a girl. Will it work for a boy? I don't know. So, and to be honest, I don't really care for the name Seamus that much. I mean, Sean, Seamus, all that kind of thing. I like them. They're fine, perfectly fine names, but it just didn't feel right. And you know how it is when a character's name isn't right? It's kind of like an itch that you can't quite reach. So then I thought, okay, if I don't like Seamus, what if I just use James? And they can call him Jamie. James is one of my favorite boys' names, and Jamie is my favorite nickname for James, which is why I used it in my first novel, Chiaroscuro. So that was kind of like, I could spell it different, and he'll mostly be called James, while the other one was mostly called Jamie, and I was just like, no, that's so super self-indulgent. So I decided I have to find something else. And so this morning I was going through all my usual suspects of name sources, mostly Nameberry, but just kind of Googling, what are some Irish nicknames? What are some popular Irish names for boys? How about popular Irish names in the 1980s? Which, of course, were mostly very traditional things like Andrew and Patrick and David and all that kind of thing. Again, perfectly good names, but not names that I wanted for this particular... See, something that I have to think about, and I don't know if every writer does this or just ones who are obsessed with names like I do, but I like to think about what these particular parents would name their children. See, William is named William because I like it. It's my grandfather's name. It's the middle name of several of my nephews. It's a good family name. If I'd ever had a son, his middle name probably would have been William too. But his parents are very conservative. They're both classical musicians themselves. They disapprove of a lot of pop culture. And they wouldn't name him something like, I don't know, Jasper, for instance. I don't know. But they would go with a nice, solid, traditional name, like William. And his sister's name is Isabel, which is kind of the same basic idea. It's a solid, classical name that, people know how to pronounce. It's not super common. William, I think, is more common than Isabel is, but it's still one that people, recognize, and it's familiar. So, with William's parents being that way, and then the love interest parents being former punk musicians, I've been looking a lot at lists of punk musician names, and also names that punk musicians have given their children. And so I found a list this morning, and I can't remember where it was now that I'm stopping to think about it. It wasn't on Nameberry, which is one of my favorites. I mean, I own a ton of the books that the webmasters wrote before websites became a thing. And anyway, on this list with, Max and all this sort of thing that is more popular, one of the names listed was Lux, Lux. And the only place that I've ever heard this used before was in the Virgin Suicides. One of the sisters is named Lux, and so at first I was like, wait, isn't this a girl's name? But the article talked about people who use it on their sons, named their sons Lux. And so I wrote it down, and I went through my usual process of trying it out with the partner's name, and then trying out with the surname that I'd chosen. And let's fix Pat. It's hard to say, but it looks really good on paper. Lux Fitzpatrick. There we go. I can speak. I am actually capable of it. So I'm letting it sit, sort of. Although I have changed it in the Ulysses file. My poor story. But yeah, and there are no good nicknames for Lux that I could find. I tried to see if there was any like in German, when you're creating a diminutive, you usually add an L to it. Like Hansel is the diminutive of Hans, and Gretel is the diminutive of Greta. And in English, at least in older English, a lot of times you would add an N to it, or an N-E-T. So like that's where Robin comes from as a nickname, for instance. It's Rob plus N, so Robin. You don't see it a whole lot, and you don't see it anymore. It's not something like most of the time when people make nicknames nowadays, it's ending with as, like Sheza on Sherlock, or Gaz is one that I've seen. Baz is another one for Sebastian, of all things. It's really cute, but it's not one that you hear in the States too much. So, yeah, I've been trying to think if there's a good diminutive ending that might work with it, like Luxon. I don't know, I'm still thinking about that, because I like nicknames, and I like that they can convey a certain level of relationship. Like when you know somebody, you just call them by their name, but when you're close to them, you call them a nickname of some sort. So, like in the story so far, most people, when they call William by a term of endearment or by a diminutive, it's Will, but I want the love interest to call him Liam. And I'd use Liam entirely, but there's Liam in another one of my stories, in the Wishing Book stories, so can't use Liam again. At least I shouldn't. And honestly, if I use all of these names that I have figured out, my productivity will be huge. Just ridiculously huge. Anyway, so that's how what I've done for Camp NaNoWriMo so far, is I've edited a little bit, and I've thought a lot about names. So, yeah. So after I take my exam on Tuesday, the rest of the month, hopefully I'll have more time for actual writing. And if I can just get something done in the last 2 weeks of the month, I think I'll be pretty pleased. Life is what happens when you're making other plans, so can't be too surprised. Okay, I've been babbling for a long time, so I'm going to stop. Bye-bye, friends. We'll talk again soon.